Good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about the Federal Reserve System and how many people feel that they have too much power and too much independence. That the Federal Reserve System is really the only thing that needs regulating, and while they are the ones doing the regulating. I personally would have to disagree with these people. The Federal Reserve System has been put in place to protect banks and financial institutions from times of turmoil and to protect the economy of the United States as a whole. I feel that despite what others think, the Federal Reserve acts in the best interest of the U.S. economy at all times, not in just their own self-interest. And that if regulated by Congress or another political group, more issues would arise from that. And finally, that simply put, the regulating should be left to the experts. My first point is that the Federal Reserve System always acts in the best interest of the United States economy. Many people who disagree with me take the stance that the Federal Reserve System has failed oftentimes throughout U.S. history in what it has attempted to do. For example, in the 60s and 70s, inflation soared in the U.S. Also, during the Great Depression, the Federal Reserve System greatly failed at being the lender of last resort. I, however, think that these people tend to forget what the Federal Reserve System has done for this economy. Things that they have done to improve it and prevent situations that could have gotten a lot worse. For example, take the 2008 financial crisis. As you all know, we are still seeing the effects of this today. Had the Fed not bailed out the banks that were going down because of positions in mortgage-backed securities, who knows where the economy would be? They provided last-minute funding to these huge banks who, if failed, you would see kind of a spiraling domino effect on all of the other institutions and potentially crash the entire financial system. Clearly, I believe that they acted in the best interest of the U.S. economy at this point. If they hadn't done what they did, who knows what would have happened. My second point is that the Fed should not be regulated by Congress. Lots of people feel that Congress should be able to regulate the actions of the Federal Reserve System. The U.S. government should have a bigger impact on how the Fed acts and what the Fed does. They feel that ultimately, the U.S. President and Congress are responsible for the state of the U.S. economy. They are the ones that are getting hit hard and getting the blame if the economy does bad. They feel that, but they lack control. But people feel that that's not fair because they don't have the control over the most important agency of financial regulation and the most important agency to the U.S. economy. They also feel that economic stability relies on the coordination of monetary and fiscal policy. Thus, they should both be controlled by politicians to avoid conflicts of power and conflicts of interest. However, I feel that political control of the Fed would be devastating to the economy. Politicians are often very short-sighted and only see, things in the short run. Lots of times they do this because it's in their own self-interest. If they are elected to a position and the economy booms, they look good and they can get reelected. And I think that that's where politicians can, the conflict of interest arises. They want to see short-term growth as opposed to long-term growth. They might say they want long-term growth, but lots of what they do is short-term because of the ability to get reelected if they perform well. The Fed was created in the first place to promote the long-term stability of the U.S. economy, and that could be in danger if politicians take over. Also, I feel that if politicians were to take over and regulate the Fed, that the U.S. economic cycle could turn into a political cycle. For example, during times of elections, congressmen and other political figures, will look to expansionary monetary policy to get numbers back in the right direction, which will work in the short term, but in the long term, who knows? In the long term, short term, or I'm sorry, in the long term, you could see increased inflation, where in the short term everything looks good because interest rates are lowering or employment rates have gone up. But after the elections, the Fed would have to then pursue contractionary monetary policies in order to offset the negative effects of the expansionary monetary policies that the Fed would have taken had they been regulated by political figures. Finally, I think that, simply put, the decision of the Fed should be left to the experts. Most politicians simply don't understand, the economics behind what the Fed does, and they don't necessarily understand what is truly best for the U.S. economy in the long run. I personally would rather leave the decisions up to somebody like Ben Bernanke, who has a PhD from MIT and an undergraduate economics degree from Harvard. Basically, we look and see him as an expert. In conclusion, it is obvious that the Fed has a ton of control, and to many it might seem like too much. But what the Fed has done in the past has really, saved the U.S. from some very terrible situations. And if it was ever regulated by Congress, we could see a severe conflict of interest and the downfall of the U.S. economy. Although it could potentially work, I personally feel that it is important to leave the decisions of the Fed up to the people that are making the decisions now. They obviously work with the government, but I don't feel like they should be taken over by the government. Thank you.